I'm
Where are you
great.
calling
How are
from?
you? I'm from
Awesome.
calling from Denmark,
Yeah, nice to
Copenhagen,
see you today.
from our new offices. Yeah, yeah, it is. Well, now the blinds are going down, but
And you were just in
it is
Spain,
nice.
right?
Yeah, I went to Mallorca for a week,
Awesome.
open water
I see
swimming.
somebody
It
in the
was
comments
beautiful.
just said hi from Spain. Got somebody from Chile, Indonesia. Awesome. Panama.
That's amazing. People all over the world.
So as I said earlier, when I was waiting for you to hop on, we're going to be talking about all things breathing today. So breathing for swimming. And as
Yes.
always, we'd love to know what everyone wants to talk about. We posted a question in our stories yesterday, but we'd love to address several topics. I see some people hopping in on the comments as well. But today we're going to talk about breathing, probably the most important thing for swimming, and a lot of nuances to it from beginners to advanced, open water pool swimming, whatever the case may be, different strokes. So we're going to kind of address some of those, some of the key points around breathing.
Exactly. And one thing that I thought about preparing for this talk today is that swimming, and maybe you can brainstorm with me if you can come up with another sport that is similar. I really can't. In swimming, you are pretty restricted in your breathing while you do a cardiovascular workout. There's not a lot of other sports where that comes into play. Like you can't breathe freely while you swim. You have to worry about actually having your head above water when you want to breathe, and you need to do that timing correctly. And most other sports, you're sort of free to breathe as much and how often as you want. That's not really the
I
case
mean,
with swimming. Can you come up with
other
another
aquatic
sport that is
sports, maybe
similar?
like water polo, synchronized swimming. And I'm thinking of some sports that they do at altitude where the air is inherently less and you're compromised as a result. But swimming,
Fair.
probably the most approachable one where air is definitely a limiting factor. And it's such a complex and technical activity. And to throw like not being able to breathe freely and calmly on top of that can be a real obstacle for people as they start.
Right. And as you said, I think we will get into, um, for beginners in particular, how to start out breathing calmly and confidently in the water, different strokes as well. Um, what are some of the most common mistakes that people do when they start out swimming in
I
terms
think it
of
depends on
breathing?
the demographic I'm working with, but I'd start with the beginner. Like I work with some people who they sign up for a triathlon, they're not really prepared for the swim. They don't swim that well. They've never swum the distance, and they're kind of anxious
Mhm.
just to get in the water. Sometimes just putting their face in the water. So sometimes we're overcoming that obstacle of hey, let's see what it feels like to get our face wet. Let's put our head underwater. Let's learn to blow bubbles. Let's learn to just be calm and control our breath. And, there's plenty of air just above the surface of the water. It's helpful to remember that. You can breathe as often as you want to. And in other activities where you do have access to the air constantly, like running, cycling, other sports, we're not inhaling and exhaling constantly. So if you can learn to appreciate that and just know that you're going to take a breath every few seconds and you're going to get all the air you need, you just need to learn the skill and kind of the technical aspects of like how to get the air. Um, yeah, so we could talk a little bit more about that too. But first and foremost, is just relaxing, calming down, getting comfortable putting your face in, and knowing that the air is right at the surface. And you don't have to breathe all the way up here. You can get it right at the surface of the water and as often as you want to.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's about being calm, but as your heart rate spikes because you're doing a physical effort, it also makes it more difficult. Like you stress a little bit, you want to breathe. So, but just know that with practice, you can get to a point. When I swim freestyle, for example, I don't even think about breathing. It just happens, right? And so that there is a possibility to get to that level. It just takes time, and you have to start small. I would like to, if you're okay with that, break it down a little bit and like do some entry level stuff, things that I would do. Maybe you feel differently about it, I don't know, but some stuff that I would do with a beginner as they enter the pool for the first time, trying to be comfortable around the water, and having the head up underwater, holding your breath and stuff like that. A very good beginner level exercise that I would say is to just keep your hands on the pool side, like the pool deck, or the gutter, whatever. Keep your hands there, and then do a flutter kick with straightened arms like this, and you bring your feet up to the surface, and you do a flutter kick, and then you try to lower your head underwater and breathe out underwater, and then lift up your head, breathe in, and put your head down and breathe out. I call that blowing bubbles, like, because that's essentially what you do. And it works really great with kids, but I would say for adults too. If you're just new to swimming, you need to be comfortable around that. Having your head underwater for part of the time and then bringing it up to breathe. I think that's a really, really good first step. And you have that full control because you have your hands on the pool side to really just bring yourself out of the water if you need to have a break. Do you have any similar exercises,
I
drills
think
that you
that's a
would
great
recommend
one. And like
starting
you
out with?
said, we start with kids because it's a good skill. And for adults who aren't as familiar with the water, that's a great place to start too. A good takeaway from that is you can just stand up or lift your head up if you need to breathe. And we want to be exhaling under the water. So when your face is in the water when you're swimming, you want to be blowing bubbles through your nose and or your mouth. And you want to be blowing and exhaling all of your air out while your face is in the water. So that when you turn to breathe, which we'll talk about in a moment, you only have to inhale and it decreases the amount of time that you have to spend in that position, which can slow you down, creates drag. You don't have a lot of time to inhale, so you want to do it quickly, and you can do it frequently. So it's not all about taking these full inhales and exhales. It's really just quick exchanges of air, bubbles and exhaling under the water, inhaling at the surface quickly.
Exactly. Yeah, get used to doing that quickly, but make sure that you have all of your like your lungs are empty when you put your head up so that they're ready to take in that full air. So you need to blow out the bubbles when your head is on the water. Otherwise, you need to first push all the air out when you bring your head up before you can inhale, and that's just
Mhm.
you don't have time for that when you get to real swimming and putting it all together. So I think that's a really important skill to think about. You mentioned something. You said breathe, or I think you said breathe out, exhale through your nose or mouth. Do you have any? Is it better to do one or the other, or inhale through your nose or your mouth? Is
Well, in
there?
terms of
What is your
inhaling,
view on that?
we can probably only inhale through our mouth. It would be very difficult to inhale through your nose at the surface. I would argue that you're probably going to inhale some water if you only breathe through your nose, if you only inhale through your nose when you turn to breathe. In terms of the exhaling, I
Mm-hmm.
coach mouth and or nose. It might depend on how hard you're working. For those of you paying attention to a lot of the science on breathing and a lot of things we're looking at, there's a big focus on nasal breathing. So one could maybe make an argument for nasal exhaling under the water. There's pros and cons to both, and there's different. Our body reacts differently to how we do that, and again, it also depends on how hard you're working. But in my experience, at the competitive level, it's probably nose and mouth exhaling, inhaling just our mouth at the surface.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I've also been following all that science that you talked about, and I think that's where running would differ, right? Because we try to, when you do other cardiovascular activity, you would want to breathe in or inhale through your nose and try to exhale also through your nose or mouth if you can. That's just really difficult with swimming. You want to use that the biggest hole in your body, like the mouth, really open that and get a big mouthful of air while you have time. Um, but yeah, I would agree with you there. Um, what would be so now next step for a beginner? Well, we conquered sort of having our hands on the pool deck and sort of getting comfortable breathing out, or exhaling with the head underwater, inhaling when we bring our head up, short inhales. Um, we're comfortable with that. Moving away from the pool side would be a logical next step. What would be sort of an exercise, a
You
drill
know,
that
when
someone
I
could
coach
use?
technique, I'm starting a lot with balance and position in the water. So we're doing a lot of side kicking positions and rolling positions, which not only teach you how to be horizontal and buoyant on the surface of the water, but it also teaches you how to roll and how to turn and how to stay low to get a breath. So I'm going to put a pair of fins on a swimmer from beginner to advanced, and I really want to establish a good body line and a good streamline and being as straight as possible. And we're going to learn to roll our face out of the water, staying nice and low and keeping the mouth right at the surface. So that would be a place I would start. Um, those drills can be difficult sometimes, but I think it's really important to establish good breathing right out of the gate, coupled with that streamlined position. Occasionally, if someone's just really struggling with getting into those positions, I might recommend using a snorkel, which we use at both the beginner and the advanced level. But a snorkel in the beginning of breathing is just really derailing your ability to learn to swim and keep your head down. Could be a really great tool to allow you to get all the air you need while you get a little bit more comfortable being on top of the water and just establishing your position and streamline.
I would agree there. And if if you're looking into buying a snorkel, getting your hands on one of those, I would go for one that is called a center snorkel, that is in the middle of your forehead, not the ones for scuba diving that sit on the side of your head. It will pull your head to the side as you swim freestyle or any other stroke for that matter. So yeah, get a snorkel. I also saw there was one asking about that in the comments. A great tool to really fixate the head in the beginning. And fins, I couldn't agree more. Like gliding on the side with the fins on. I'm sure most people will stumble upon a drill called the Superman drill eventually when they take up swimming. It's really just kicking on the side, um, preferably with fins in the beginning, but you kick on the side, and then when you have mastered laying there and being comfortable, maybe you can take a couple of breaths from the side like this. You want to rotate to the other side, do one stroke, and you rotate over to the other side, and you complete the kicking from the other side. It's really just about learning how to balance, as you said, and being comfortable, not only being with your stomach facing the bottom, but also gliding on your side and be able to breathe while you're on your side. Really important. Um, Bringing the strokes into it, um, other than the Superman drill, it's just one stroke. Maybe you want to do one or two strokes per length, not more than that. It's just about kicking on the side, essentially. Bringing the strokes into it, how often should we try to breathe if we are a beginner swimmer? I hear people talking about bilateral breathing is really important. Instead of unilateral breathing, breathe one side only. Can you
Really,
say
you
anything
want
about
to be getting
that?
as much air as possible. So unless you're a 50-meter sprinter where we might be holding breath or only taking one or two breaths, I would argue that anything over 100 meters, maybe even over 50 meters, you should be breathing every other stroke to the same side. So if I'm a left side breather, every time I roll to the left side and take that left arm stroke, I'm going to take a breath. And it's really important that we time that breath with the pull so that that pull gives us some lift, our arm gets out of the way, and we can roll to breathe. So we're going to breathe every other stroke, where every stroke cycle is each arm to the same side. What I like to do to create balance is I'm always going to breathe to the same wall. So when I'm coming towards you, I might be breathing to my left. And when I go away, I might turn and then now I'm going to be breathing to my right. So I'm
Mm.
getting some symmetry because it is important to be able to breathe to both sides for various reasons. But in terms of getting enough air, if you're an open water swimmer, a triathlete, you're a competitive swimmer over 100 meters, over 100 yards, you're probably going to be breathing every other stroke to the same side over and over again.
Oh yeah, that's a really good point, right? You still get to breathe to both sides, but you get as much as possible because you breathe to every second stroke. Could you actually breathe every stroke? Is that
You
something
could,
that you would
you
want to
probably
do?
would not want to do it because then your face would essentially be out of water the whole time. You would get dizzy, disoriented, you wouldn't hold a good line. So we see people breathe to the
Hmm.
left and then breathe to the right, breathe to the left, breathe to the right, and they're just kind of zigzagging, and that would not be optimal. It would actually probably be too much air. So, I don't know what the timing is. Maybe around stroke timing, but two strokes are maybe taking 2 seconds. You're getting a breath like every 2 seconds. So as soon as your face goes in, you're exhaling immediately. And then here comes the left stroke again. You're rolling and taking that breath.
Yeah, I think most swimmers, also competitive level swimmers, would breathe every second stroke unless they're swimming a sprint event. I think even from maybe 100 and upwards, they start to breathe every second, at least as some part of that race. Then towards the finish, you would bring your head down, not breathing at all. You don't need oxygen the last 15 meters of the race. But outside of that last 15, it's really about getting a lot of oxygen as you swim. It's a super difficult sport and it takes a lot of oxygen out of you. So you need that air to keep going. You mentioned something when you spoke earlier about open water. That's a whole different game because there you're not only swimming in. There's probably going to be a little bit of choppy water. You have to worry about waves, timing your breaths to the waves coming in. I wouldn't recommend a beginner swimmer who has to learn how to breathe in while swimming to start out in open water, but maybe that's their goal, right? They want to go to the open water, they want to explore the ocean. Maybe they signed up for some ocean race that they want to do. How should we think about transitioning from the pool to open water and breathing
Well,
when we do that?
I would imagine in some parts of the world, people have less access to pools generally, and maybe their whole exposure is open water. I might guess too that those individuals are probably pretty
Good
comfortable
point.
if they've been like kind of exposed to it their whole life. But if you've been swimming in the pool primarily, which I think is a lot of triathletes and open water swimmers, we primarily train in a pool. The more you can train in the open water and get comfortable in the open water, the better. Start in familiar bodies of water. Always go with someone else. Keep it safe. You probably want to start on a calmer day so that you don't have to. The more elements that you can control, the better. So if we can control the weather, we can't control the weather, but if we can show up on a better day, a calmer day, that might be a good place to start. But then that bilateral breathing is going to become so important in terms of like wave break or chop. You were going to want to breathe away from that. So we wouldn't want to turn into a wave coming at us. There's some strategies for when that's happening, but essentially we would want to be breathing away from the chop. And there's other reasons in the open water where we may want to site specifically to a specific shoreline or a landmark or different buoys, or maybe we have a kayaker or boat support or another swimmer that we're sighting off of. So if you have the skill set to be able to breathe to both sides, you are going to be more efficient and you're going to be able to use that to your advantage based on the situation. You know, there's times too where maybe you're following a boat and you've got boat exhaust a little bit on one side, or it's really sunny on one side and you might not want to turn to that side, for example. Or I do some pretty epic swims in New York City, and sometimes I want to like look at the Statue of Liberty or the skyline. So I'm going to specifically want to swim to one side. And oftentimes with kayak support, they'll ask you what side that you prefer them to be on. And I'll often ask them to kind of switch halfway so that I can mix up and balance out some of those stresses and some of those positions.
That makes a lot of sense. I signed up for an open water race this summer, so I might be able to use that tip. It also just gets you get to know
Yeah.
when you're halfway. I think that's motivating too. Yeah, so I think I'll remember that one. Um, is there any tools that we can use outside of the water to help us breathe? Any exercises? I know I've worked with some free divers who did exercises on land to really like make your lungs work with the pressure that they have to go through when you're swimming. Um, are you familiar with any? I don't know if there's any like like physical other tools that we can use to enhance our breathing.
Well,
I
there's
don't know
some
if you use
simple
that at all.
exercises that we can start with. I assess all of my potential clients and athletes' breathing tolerance. So something I do a breath hold test in my assessment process to see how well someone. I watch how well someone can mechanically inflate and expand and get air and volume into their body, and then how well they tolerate being able to hold their breath
Mm-hmm.
and be comfortable as CO2 starts to build up and oxygen starts to decrease. And then from there, based on that information, we're going to start with teaching them how to breathe and how to expand. There's different exercises to learn, like where air should be going, maybe where it's stuck. Sometimes we might see someone who's like really upper trap, and kind of upper accessory muscle breathing. We might want to decrease that a little bit. They're unable to expand kind of three-dimensionally through their stomach and their sides and their back and their rib cage. So there's various positions and strategies to work on being able to inflate. And then over time, we can increase the cadence of breath. So how long can someone inhale deep and slow? Can they hold it a little bit at the top? How long can they exhale deep and slow? Can they hold it a little bit at the bottom? And we can start to expand how long they're able to do that. And they become better at getting more air in. They become more comfortable drawing out those breaths, being comfortable with CO2. So there's a bunch of different breathing cadences or counts or tempos that we can do to increase someone's ability to hold their breath. In swimming, we don't have to hold our breath that much, so that could be a mistake, which we should talk about in a moment. In free diving, where people are going down very deep and holding their breath for several minutes, we're now finding that athletes can hold their breath for several minutes, but that's something that you kind of progressively build up in a safe way, and there's some very specific strategies. So we're going to use some of those for swimming. So to answer your question, I do a lot of breath work and breath exercises on land, and then we talk about how that translates back into the water.
I did a lot of, as I said, breath work with a free diver on my team. I don't know if what the science is behind it, if it actually does work for what I was trying to achieve, but it was great fun to try at least something new in my workout. But it was essentially trying to, as you also said, build up. Like first time I would try to hold my breath, I could maybe hold it a minute, and then I was feeling kind of like now I need to breathe. But then doing that just a couple of times within 10 minutes, I was able to extend that quite a lot. And I think over a 2 week period where we did that every other day or so, I was able to hold my breath for more than 5 minutes. And I wouldn't have guessed that I would be able to do that when we started that whole process. So I just think there's so much to explore with being able to hold your breath in you can do a lot more with that. Just make sure that there's someone there to watch you at all times when you do this type of work. But it's
You know,
quite fascinating
I would point
what
out
you
too
can
to
do.
those listening that a minute is elite. So like just starting at a minute, you were a professional swimmer. So like your lung
Oh.
capacity and breath tolerance is already elite. And now you're learning some more advanced strategies from a different industry or skill set. But I like to see people be able to hold their breath for at least 20 seconds. And then certainly if you want to be competitive, we want to get up closer to
Mm.
the minute plus. But absolutely keep it safe. There's some safe and professional ways to be able to do these things, but we don't want to expose ourselves to risk. It can be dangerous to be holding your breath. In swimming, we do some hypoxic work in the pool where we might be holding our breath for specific stroke rates. So going back to bilateral breathing, breathing every 3, 5, 7, 9, holding our breath for 25 meters, some people holding their breath for 50 meters or more. But you want to keep that safe. You want to have a coach on deck, lifeguard on deck, monitoring you. Um, we don't want to be doing breath holding contests. You know, we want to be using breathing strategies and breathing sets very specifically to progressively build our tolerance for whatever the goal is with the breath needs that we have for our events and competitions.
Exactly. And it's actually got me thinking, how much percent of your full lung capacity would you say that you inhale in a normal freestyle? If I'm just swimming easy freestyle, I'm going to swim maybe, let's say, a 400 meter. I'm not worrying about my time. It's just an aerobic swim. My guess is, I don't know, 20%, 20%, 30%, maybe. It's a quick inhale. It's like, and then I'm head down again. It's maybe less. And I know it for sure because when I would do those types of hypoxia workouts that you're describing, breathing every 3, every 5, every 7, if I have to hold my breath for 7 strokes, it's not that long even, but that's when I would try to do a bigger breath of air when I get the chance, right? It would maybe be, and then hold my breath. So I just hold it a little bit longer to be able to last for 7 strokes, maybe 9, maybe 11, whatever that is. But normally, if I'm just going every second, every third, it's just a very snappy, very quick breath. Do you have any idea how much
I
of
know
my lung capacity I'm actually
there's an answer to
using when
that
I'm doing that?
question that I don't have specifically, but when you're inhaling and exhaling, you're never fully inhaling the volume of your lungs and you're never truly exhaling. There's always air left over back and forth. A lot of your brain's desire to breathe is more desire to blow out CO2. However, we need CO2
Mm,
to CO2 helps us manage our breath and manage how we exchange oxygen. So it's not all about getting rid of CO2. We actually want some of it in our body. And a lot of the science is showing us that we all should be actually just breathing less. We don't need to be taking so many breaths, and it should be deeper and slower, and there should be longer periods in between, but we don't need to be constantly inhaling and exhaling. And sport, I think, really teaches us how to manage that a little bit more. And certainly aerobically fit individuals are taking fewer breaths per minute. They're using less oxygen. They're more efficient at it, and they're more comfortable with CO2. But we're never truly inhaling and exhaling completely and fully between those breaths. Like I said earlier, it's probably going to be more quick sips.
mm. Yeah, that's very. I just think I never really think about it because you just happen to do it when you get to a certain level. But it is really about relaxing and getting the heart rate as low as possible with the effort that you're doing, right? You don't want to be too tense. You don't want to, because that's also gonna put an extra tax on your breathing. Um, I wanted to finish off with maybe a somehow a short workout that people could do to work on their breathing pattern, or not only breathing pattern, but just getting comfortable if they're beginner swimmer. Um, I've split it into 3 times, 4 times 25, and you can add any points that you want to any of these drills. But we talked about in earlier the Superman drill. I would definitely spend 4 times 25 on the Superman drill, and definitely putting on fins. Is there anything we should focus on if we do the
Um,
Superman drill?
well, relaxing. A lot of people go out too fast, too hard. So the swimming is all about reducing, like isolating things and taking away. So with the Superman drill, we're taking away your stroke. We're keeping you in a fixed position. We're adding fins to give you some lift and propulsion. And then you just want to relax. Your legs eat up a
Mm-hmm.
lot of energy and a lot of oxygen. So while we have those fins on, we don't want to be kicking like crazy right out of the gate. It should be slow and relaxed. You're learning to establish good body position. Focus on your exhales, blowing, feeling, hearing the bubbles underneath the water. And then as you need to, very comfortably rolling your face out of the water to breathe and getting air and then going back into the position. One thing we didn't point out earlier is that the most streamlined position for you to be in is head down and in this long position.
Mm-hmm.
And every time you turn to breathe, you're creating drag. So if you can reduce the amount of time you spend in that position,
Right.
you're going to decrease drag. So those breaths should be quick, but they also should be relaxed.
Right. And that's why the Superman drill is good, because you're always on the side here. So you're always in a good streamlined position. And you can also, you can turn your head multiple times to the same side while you're on that side. You don't have, but always try to bring your head back to being underwater. And then you can train it for breathing. Then the next exercise that I would spend 4 times 25 doing is what I call 6 kick, 3 strokes. And it's basically a little bit of a progression on the Superman drill, right? You take 6 kicks on the side, and then after having done that, you can maybe finish off with a breath. Then you do 3 strokes, 1, 2, 3, and then you end on the other side, and you continue with kicking, same as you did with the Superman drill for 6 strokes, or for 6 kicks, sorry. And then you do another 1, 2, 3, then you're on the other side. It's a little bit of a progression. It brings it a little bit closer to standard normal freestyle, but you still have to balance on your side, and you get that opportunity to relax there and breathe as much as you want while you're on your side before doing another 3 strokes. Okay, great. Happy you agree. Then the last one that I would recommend is really just to limit the time on the side and do normal freestyle. And that's where we talked about already, doing breathing every second or every third if you can, and try to be comfortable with that. But keep the distance at 25 maximum, one length, and take the rest that you need, and then do that for 4 25s. That whole set is 12 25s, and I would repeat that any number of times through as you can, and that would be a really good workout to get into focusing on your breathing pattern.
Well, we
Is
certainly
there anything that we could add to
but
that?
those are the same drills that I'm going to start with from a beginner swimmer to an advanced swimmer. We often use those in the warm up. We can establish good position and then go into some of our training sets. But those are really great
Good
drills
point.
that you could use through all the phases of the stroke for a variety of reasons. So there's some core drills that are going to apply to every aspect of the stroke, regardless of what your need is. And those are some good ones, and there's others. But as always, we'll share some of these drills after the call as well. We can do a post about them. But these are classic, tried and true drills that apply to everyone, beginner to advanced, and they apply to every phase of the freestyle stroke.
100%. I used to do them right up until I finished my career. It's not only for beginners. That's a good point. Yeah, let's share some of those later. Thank you so much, Dan. It was great chatting about breathing
this was
patterns
fun, and
breathing while
everyone
swimming.
listening here now or later, let us know what else you want us to talk about. We're happy to cover a variety of topics. We cover some of the big rocks, but we're happy to talk about them, share some examples, and just continue to educate and help people train and swim faster.
Definitely. Yeah. Shoot us a message in the comments, and we'll be right there.
Thanks, everybody.
Respond.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dan. Bye-bye.